We're joined now by Heidi Sloan. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get started with this whole campaign?
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. I have a background that does not look like I should be running for Congress, fortunately, in some circumstances. I used to be a public school teacher. I worked in a classroom for kids with disabilities, fully integrated with kids who did not have disabilities. And I loved that space. I loved seeing outcomes that were better across the board when we met each other where we are. And after a while there, I got a wild hair and decided I wanted to become a farmer. So I did. And I now work out at Mobilos and Fish's Community First Village. I've been there for, I guess, about 7 years now. And I grow food alongside of people who have previously experienced chronic homelessness. So my friends have been out for 10 or 20 or 30 years sometimes. And I also really love that work. But of course, it is heavy work. It is heart heavy work. And after a while, I realized that either I needed to go upstream and start addressing the issues that cause homelessness, or I probably needed to take a step back to protect myself from the grief that was just filling me up every day. And so I did the first one. I doubled down and I started community organizing. Very fortunate to meet incredible organizers across the state of Texas, and very fortunate to jump on some campaigns locally, campaigns like the Paid Sick Days campaign for all workers here in Austin, and then up in Dallas and in San Antonio as well. Campaigns like Medicare for All. We got to encourage, and we successfully encouraged Lloyd Doggett to sign on to HR 1384, which was incredible. And then campaigns more locally for the affordable housing bond, for the police union contract that was more transparent and more accountable to the community here. And in all of those spaces, it's just been us. Those who are directly affected, those who feel deeply and see the struggle in our neighborhoods, standing up to do what we think is right. And to know that the power of those of us who are willing to stand up and call others in can move such big mountains. In my own recent past, having witnessed that really inspired me to do something even bigger with that momentum, with that courage, and with that trust.
You talked about homelessness, and this has been such a divisive issue, especially in recent months here in Austin, and it's been a big part of what you've been talking about on your campaign. How would you tackle this from the congressional level?
Right. In my work at the local level, I have run into barriers time and time again at the state level, what things that the Texas state ledge has put into place to prevent municipalities like Austin in truly addressing homelessness and housing insecurity issues as a whole. I'm on the Community Development Commission for the city of Austin, and I see there the grants that come through and the limited efficacy of those grants and how we really leverage those dollars, but they only go so far. I also see at the municipal level how the state of Texas has preempted discrimination of income sources in housing. So actually landlords can say if you have a voucher, you can't live here. The Texas state ledge has made that a rule. And I see at the federal level how amendments like the Faircloth Amendment and other laws that prevent us in investing in public housing have really limited what we can do at the state and the local levels. And so Congress is the opportunity to affect housing change across this country, to really create a mandate for housing first plus. Housing first that is dignified, housing first that is integrated, housing first that does not just address people who are already evicted and potentially living on the streets, but those who are having a hard time affording their housing right now. I believe that housing is a human right, and I want people to stay in the homes where they want to grow their families, where they're already growing their communities. I don't think that housing is just a vehicle for the wealthy to get wealthier. So we have a few policies around that. One is rent stabilization, and rent stabilization affects both home ownership. It stabilizes the increasing costs, both value of homes and taxes, and it directly affects the rent costs, which in Austin, in the last decade, we've seen go up, 96% at this point. So limiting those increases per year to around 3%. which means that people are still getting a return on their investment, those who are in it for the reasons of actually accommodating human beings to live. But it also means that it's keeping up with the changes in our wages on average, which on average go up something more like 3% than what we see our housing stock go up now. We acknowledge that rent stabilization is not going to be the favorite policy of the really big development corporations, the really big investors. And we know that some of them will exit this business because it doesn't make them enough money fast enough. It's okay by me. And so what we have to do to make up for that is to make sure that we are also pushing for policies that allow for more dense development and policies that allow for more integrated development, and most specifically that we do in fact allow municipalities to grow the number of public housing units that they have available. Public housing gets a bad rap, but that's because it's been disinvested from since the Reagan administration. We know that we can follow the money. Public housing has been proven to be capable of providing dignified, safe, life-giving atmospheres for families around the country when we do it right. So part of that is making sure that the rent from that situation goes to the upkeep of the community that it is intended to serve, and not into a federal bucket where it is redistributed to who knows what process across the country. So we're really looking at it from a stabilization standpoint, that across the board we need to be able to anticipate and to build on and invest in, with not just our dollars but with our families and with our futures, the kind of housing that works for us.
So we've talked about housing. If you could pick 3 priority issues for Congress to tackle, what would those be?
Oh my goodness, yeah. So I always lead with the Green New Deal. And I know that the Green New Deal is sort of understood from different perspectives in different circles. For me, when I read that shall policy, which it's not a mandate, it doesn't say we're going to do X, Y, and Z on this timeline. It says that we acknowledge that climate change is real, that we have a limited amount of time to do something about it. And further and importantly, that addressing climate change on the backs of poor and working class people is not going to work in a practical way. It's also never going to work politically. We know that we will get too much pushback if we try to amend for the climate change by leveraging a gas tax. And that's not just in the US, that is across the globe. We see the pushback when that happens. No austerity is going to get us where we need to be. So the Green New Deal instead says we have to decarbonize by 2030 and be fully renewable by 2035. And the most important piece of that puzzle is a federal jobs guarantee, is a mandate that whoever wants to help us get there, which is going to be a whole lot of people. There is going to be so much work, both for people to transition to and for people to find new work in. And allowing for a federal jobs guarantee means that we have a carrot and not a stick. We're not going to blame those who have been part of climate change because they had to, not the corporations and not the CEOs who are making such a profit off of it. We're not going to tell them that it's their fault, not let them be burdened by it, but let them be inspired to grow new work out of it, to make sure that we have great public transit coming out of it, that we have dignified housing coming out of it, and most importantly, once again, that we have good jobs coming out of it. So that's climate change. It is a huge policy, and I think the first thing is probably just going to be accounting for all of those job creation opportunities that we have in front of us. Mm-hmm. And then the second one that I would say is something I've been fighting for an awfully long time at this point, Medicare for All, which is a single universal policy that says everybody is in and nobody is out, because healthcare is for all of us, period. That no one should be avoiding the doctor for fear of the bill that is going to follow them home. That when Governor Abbott and my mama are on the same health care plan, maybe he will stop trying so hard to sink it. I deeply believe that Medicare for All is politically viable. I have knocked, previous to this campaign, in coalition around 40,000 doors for Medicare for All. Most of the people who we encounter who are actually happy with their current health care are on Medicare. Most everyone else is not happy. Mm-hmm. And it's been the same story here in District 25 as we've been knocking doors. We're very policy forward, so we talk about this a lot. Medicare for all is politically viable. It's also very practical. It will, across the board, save us money in the United States, and it will save families money as well. It is not a tax cut. Let's be super clear here. It is not a tax cut, but it is a public program for us to publicly invest in. We'll save, the statistics are slightly varying, but a conservative estimate is we'll save families thousands of dollars per year, depending on their income level, because we will use progressive taxation to make sure that we're paying for it equitably.
Mm-hmm. Now, you identify as a democratic socialist. Are you worried that this label, if you will, could hurt you with voters who have been, typically exposed to the incumbent and maybe more conservative Roger Williams?
Thank you for this question. Roger Williams is a fascinating character, one of the wealthiest members of Congress, a person who inherited some car dealerships up in Fort Worth and Weatherford, Texas, and likes to say to folks that democratic socialists want everything just handed to them for free, which is interesting because I work on a farm, and I have worked since I was 15 years old, versus someone who truly was handed a lot at the beginning of his life and has had an entire congressional district carved up and handed to him as well. But Roger Williams really likes to say the S word. He likes to ask people if they're a socialist or a capitalist. And here's the thing, when we knock doors, whether it is here in Austin or we go to land passes quite frequently, we love knocking doors in Killeen, up in Cleburne, which is one of the most segregated cities in Texas, in Burleson, or down in Wimberley. When we knock doors, it does not matter who is on the other side. They're not going to be a red or a blue person. That's not how people show up in their lives. The first thing that folks show up as is a dad or a grandma or a firefighter or a farmer or a builder, is a neighbor, is a churchgoer. They have so many identities that come before how they vote. And we want to meet them there, in that space. And we use an organizing model that comes directly out of labor. And it says, when I talk to you, I need to be asking questions first, right? I need to hear your story. I need to build trust there. And the questions go, what do you want? How come you don't have that? What do you think it's going to take to get it? And for us, that first question has variability. People are struggling with different things. I want clean water. I want good schools. I want health care. But the second question, how come you don't have those things, is always answered with either someone has power over me, or more often, someone is making a profit off of that. And so, knowing that that is going to be the second answer, we can anticipate the third question. What do you think it's going to take to change that? Folks don't want to hear, just show up and vote on March 3rd. Of course we want you to show up and vote on March 3rd, of course. But we need so much more than that. We need you standing shoulder to shoulder with your neighbor, showing up for the fights that affect our lives every single day, for the politics that follows us home, that follows us to our schools and our jobs and our healthcare, and mandates how we interact with the environment. We need people to grow as leaders. And so when we have those conversations, we're not telling people that you are wrong, that you should be ashamed of how you voted. We are asking people to show up for themselves, first and foremost. I don't care if they ever call themselves a democratic socialist or not. I want them to know that their voice matters, that they have power, and the best thing we can do is use our power collectively together.
Heidi, Sloan, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.